Podracing was a dangerous sport where small one-man crafts propelled by large engines raced at breakneck speeds around a track. Although the sport was popularised on less developed worlds such as Malastare, Theron and Tatooine, entertainment establishments all across the galaxy projected the exciting action. Betting on podracing became a popular pastime, which granted Anakin Skywalker freedom from slavery after winning the Boonta Eve Classic Podrace. The sport may have peaked in popularity during the final decades of the Galactic Republic, but due to its guaranteed carnage and action-packed drama, podracing survived the Empire's rule over the galaxy. Welcome to the Carnage Star Wars Lore episode 128, Podracing. Although each podracer looked and performed differently, they all consisted of the same components. The pod not only housed the racer's pilot, but they also contained a repulsor lift engine which kept the craft at a specific low-level altitude. Connected by long steel-tin cables, the pods were propelled by one or more pairs of incredibly powerful and large turbine engines. Although they were not physically connected to each other, the engines were linked by power couplings consisting of plasma discharges. Podracing was popularised in the Outer Rim territories during the last decades of the Galactic Republic, but due to its underground nature, great excitement, and the guaranteed carnage involved with each race, podracing attracted all manner of beings living on the fringes of society. What made podracing the most dangerous sport ever created was the speeds each racer performed at. With a top speed of around 900 km an hour, only non-humans had the reflexes and dexterity to control the pods around each course. However, one human managed to podrace. The young slave Anakin Skywalker was so gifted with the Force, he was able to outmaneuver and outperform his non-human competitors to win the Boonta Eve Classic. The roots of podracing trace back to the days of animal-drawn carts, from which the Hano speeders evolved. After his victory over the Parliament of Moralin, the events were held at the behest of Boonta the Hutt and continued after his death. As the centuries passed, the sport continued to evolve and kept pace with that of galactic technology. The concept of modern-day podracing was started on Malastare by Gustav Wembus. Without much testing, the alien entered himself into a race with a super-fast prototype pod designed by a mechanic named Phobos. The Boonta Eve Classic, held on Tatooine in 32 BBY, may have been the most famous pod race of all time, especially because it marked the first time a human ever won the sport, but other popular races around the same time included the Vinta Harvest Classic on Malastare, the Ando Overland on Ando Prime, and the Aline Classic on Aline. Although pod racing was illegal, but often controlled by the Hutts, it flourished among planets in the Outer Rim and was also spectated by citizens from the core worlds. Large view screens and CD establishments such as the Outlander Club on Coruscant relayed pod races from all across the galaxy. The sport's popularity peaked following Anakin Skywalker's win, but as the political situation in the Republic deteriorated, so did the appeal of pod racing. After many of the sport's generally accepted criminal activities were exposed, and some of the most famous racers were arrested for a variety of crimes, podracing was outlawed in the core region of the galaxy. It was reported that more than 50% of the sport's audience from the era of the Battle of Naboo had dropped shortly before the outbreak of the Clone Wars. Although betting transactions remained at an all-time high, podracing soon gave way to other forms of extreme sports, such as swoop racing. Furthermore, podracing became outlawed across the entire galaxy with the declaration of a new order due to the Empire's far more stringent standards of law enforcement. As a result, the popularity of the sport fell altogether. However, in 2 BBY, Cloud City's Vapor Room continued to show holoscreens of pod races, and despite the ban, podracing, especially the Boonta Eve Classic, continued on Tatooine. By 30 ABY, the sport began to make a comeback, and in 137 ABY, podracing was once more relayed in drinking establishments on Coruscant. Now it's time for last week's question. Do you personally like the idea of podracing? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to vote for next week's episode by liking one of the 3 comments below, and head on over to thecarnagezans.com to have your say in future Star Wars lore videos. Thanks for watching, and for more Star Wars related content, keep it locked here to the Carnagezans. Well before the Galactic Empire's rule over the galaxy, Geonosian weaponsmiths researched the sonic wave theory. As a result, they eventually constructed basic generators that converted sonic vibrations into other forms of energy. Geonosian miners then developed sonic hammers, whose basic premise was later developed into sonic blaster weaponry.